enthusiast, disability inclusion advocate as well. She is a patriotic Nigerian who is passionate about young people pursuing purpose-driven lives that will make an influential impact in society. So we're going to start the first session. The session is divided into two. The first session will speak to rights and the second to inclusion. I'll hand over to Vita Gogo now. Thank you. Please, can we appreciate her?
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this session. I will just dive straight into the session, but before I do that, I want to say a big thank you to Paradigm Initiative. Why do I say that? A lot of times when programs like this are organized, disability inclusion is an afterthought. And I've seen it happen several times, whether in the corporate sector, in the public sector, even the social sector. And so this is the first time that we're having this kind of session, and it's not actually an afterthought. Our journey here, actually began, our journey with Paradigm Initiative began last year when they came for stakeholders meeting for NIN awareness in Rivers State. And the first question I asked them back then was, are you inviting any person with disability? And they said no. So we organized it, we were there for the meeting and actually had, I don't want to say a brawl, but we had a big fight with the lady from the National Population Commission. And then thereafter I went to Abuja to do training with them. And so it's actually very, very heartwarming to see that today we're here and there's a specific panel for disability inclusion. Before I go on to call my panelists, I want to also mention something very quickly. And that's the fact that disability inclusion is not a privilege, it's a fundamental human right. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, that is not the construct. The construct is based on charity and medical constructs. The model of human rights and social inclusion is not particularly evident in Nigeria. But the truth is that it is everybody's responsibility to ensure that our brothers and sisters, our family members, friends with disabilities are included, that no one is left behind. And what that means is that every person in this room has to become a disability inclusion advocate. Very important. But more than anything else, what is exciting me today is the fact that my friends are coming here to speak for themselves, because a lot of times you have other people speaking for them and saying things that, sometimes really get me upset. For example, I hear things like, disability starts in the mind. And I'm like, duh. If it starts in the mind, what happens when you have someone who is mobility challenged and sees a flight of stairs? Is the person just going to say to the mind, you can do it, and starts walking up the flight of stairs, while the person who is not mobility challenged just, maybe runs up and gets to wherever they're going to? That's one aspect of looking at it. Or somebody who is visually impaired or blind trying to get on a bus. It has staircases, there are lots of voices, so many distractions, and the person doesn't even know where to start from. That takes me to something else. 2019, we had what we call Dinner in the Dark. It's an experiential social experience where we eat with persons with disabilities, especially the blind, while those without disabilities are blindfolded. And then we try to make them realize what it's like for about 3 hours to walk in the shoes of the blind, where you have to eat everything, do everything with your eyes blindfolded. And I would have loved to do that experience here where you use a guide cane, because it's an experience I conduct anytime I have a program. Maybe when we're done, towards the end, I'll call for a volunteer and borrow a guide cane and blindfold someone so that you get to a place of what we call empathy, okay? So I'll call my panelists for the first session, Mr. Dan Lamy. When they come up, they'll introduce themselves so you appreciate them better. Dr. Gabriel. Ms. Tobiloba. And Mr. Damilari. Okay, so one of the first things we notice getting here is that this hotel is actually not disability accessible, okay? So I think you should give that feedback. It's a 5-star hotel, but it's not disability accessible, which means that during the design, disability inclusion was not taken into consideration. Okay, initially we assigned questions to everybody, but you know, when we had our brief meeting, this is the first time that a lot of us are meeting. So when we had our first meeting, our meeting outside rather, we decided that we're just going to throw the questions out. And this session is for 45 minutes. We're just going to throw the questions out and then anybody can answer the question. But please try and keep it short so that the whole idea is that people hear your voices today and they're able to recognize the challenges and all the problems that you go through on a daily basis as persons with disabilities. I'll start with my first question. And the first question was actually contributed by my assistant, Ngozi. And when you decide to answer the question, please introduce yourself so that the audience will know you. And the reason why I was excited about this question is because of the forthcoming elections, 2023 elections. In 2015, I decided to do a Twitter chat with a friend of mine who has dwarfism, very intelligent young lady who is in the social media space. And why did I decide to do that? Because of the elections and how persons with disabilities are supposed to be included in the forthcoming elections that year. Because I had our beneficiaries come to meet me and they told me a lot of things that were quite disturbing. A deaf person will go to get registered and be sent away. Or you have somebody who is blind and the person gets there, the environment is so hostile, you know, stigmatization, marginalization and all of that, and they couldn't get registered, they couldn't even vote. Now, while we were even doing that Twitter chat, some people sent me when we should be talking about something more important. Yes. And hello? I wasn't really shocked. Then that, hello? Create an enabling environment for persons with disabilities to exercise the franchise the forthcoming 2023 elections. Could you give them a microphone, please? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very, excuse me. Thank you very much. My name is Dan Lamy Basharu. I'm the executive director of the Nigerian Association of the Anglo-Nigeria Welfare Association for the Blind. and also a member of the committee on the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Thank you very much. Of course, this question is very important, particularly when we're moved to the 2023 elections. We need to know where we stand, whether we have any rights. INEC is the agency responsible for conducting elections. And we know very well that INEC has been working extensively with some disability organizations in order to realize a hitch-free election for persons with disabilities, such as the Inclusive Friends Association. INEC has been working extensively with the IFA. This works includes voter education and sensitization, such as engaging persons with disabilities in the voting process. This also includes making sure that persons with disabilities from different disability okay, from different disabilities are given the opportunity for full participation and inclusion. Thus, there must be jingles in sign language or on television, and there should be such information provided in newsprint. Videos should be made be inclusive of all persons with disabilities, including blind and deaf and blind deaf persons. INEC has been informed of the voting units, which should be on the ground floor or even flat surfaces. Why do we want to have such? Because we know that we have persons with disabilities who cannot climb. So it's better to have them on the ground floor or on even flat surfaces. Assistance too should be available to persons with disabilities, such as blind and visually impaired persons and others with disabilities that need it. We have also emphasized the need for priority voting. That is whereby voters with disabilities vote on the line. Voters on disability are given priority opportunity to vote. Similarly, I should explain more about priority voting, because when we talk about private voting, we talk about giving opportunity to the voters with disabilities to vote first. And I think you can understand why that has to be so, because we know that the voting environment can be chaotic in some parts. So we ensure that persons with disabilities are given opportunity to vote. Similarly, we have emphasized the use of the Braille ballot guide and magnifying glasses to persons with albinism. The Braille ballot guide is the system whereby you can do your voting using the Braille system. And of course, we need magnifying glasses for persons with albinism. Now, this information is necessary for the authorities so that persons with disabilities can participate effectively and meaningfully in the election process. However, we're very concerned that persons with intellectual disabilities and persons with psychosocial disabilities are very often overlooked in the election process. Now, how much of this is consumed by INEC is much of a guess. It is possible to get all your information across to the authorities, but making the authorities comprehend is another important thing. Now, another very important aspect of electioneering is the various forms available to voters, especially persons with disabilities. Because voters with disabilities too are entitled to be elected and to also elect. And I'm sure voters with disabilities too want to stand for elections as well, want to be governors, want to be presidents, and so on. So they're entitled to have that opportunity. Unfortunately, nowadays we hear of various forms for different political parties, where some parties are saying that people want to be elected have to buy forms for 100 million, 40 million, and so on. Now, this is most discriminatory of persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities definitely will not have the means to be able to do that. Women are given free choices of forms, but persons with disabilities are not being regarded. And that is completely shooting out persons with disabilities from participation in the electoral process. If we want to make the electoral process free and fair for all, then it has to be for everybody. And so it is important. We have informed INEC about our needs. And so it is important that INEC takes into consideration what we have told them. And we hope that INEC will be, of course, I know that INEC is very supportive of people with disabilities. And we hope that going forward, there will be more room for people with disabilities to be able to participate actively. Well, INEC may not be on the ground at every polling unit, but it's important that they make sure that the various components are put together so that they understand the rights of persons with disabilities to vote. It is important at every point to ensure that people with disabilities have a right to vote and be voted for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so very quickly, I remember that in the various elections, young people have come up with various apps covering different issues, from election fraud to rigging to election violence and all of that. So if you're a young person here and you're in the tech space, maybe this is another area that you should also look at. How many people with disabilities actually come to the polling booths to exercise their franchise? I'd would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Does any of the panelists have anything to quickly add before we jump into the next question? Yeah. Okay. Sister, very quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Gabriel Suji. I'm done, but I talk. The reason was I was born here, I became that later. So I'm a senior lecturer at Florida State University. I'm an American return. I came back to Nigeria recently after many years. Developed special education in Nigeria. So now, one more to what Mr. Delany Basharu said now. From my experience in the US, persons with disabilities are always given priority, attention, and they're always the first to vote. during elections. They say they forefront during elections before other persons go to vote. If the disabled wouldn't vote, others would vote. When forms are filled, they make room for disability sections there, while persons with disability will fill their forms and tender the forms earlier. And persons with disabilities are allowed to vote earliest before others. So I think Nigeria should borrow a leaf from the US and other countries abroad to give them room to vote and exercise their voting rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are lots of things that Nigeria needs to borrow. I can assure you that if this hotel were in America or in any of the Western world, it would not be built like this. It would not be built like this without taking into consideration at the design stage the inclusion of persons with disabilities. So what resources are important for persons with disabilities to be successful in the world of work and social life?
So my name is Tobiloba Ajayi. I run an organization called the Let Cerebral Palsy Kids Learn Foundation, promotes inclusive mainstream education for children with cerebral palsy in Nigeria. As an aside, I also have cerebral palsy myself. And I know that the reason I can sit here today is because my parents deemed it fit that I get an education. So when I hear questions like, what was the word?
What resources are important?
So when I hear what resources are important, what it says to me is that, first of all, that question looked at people with disabilities as an homogeneous group, and they're not. The resources that are important to a blind person are not the resources that are important to me as somebody with cerebral palsy. So it's important when we're dealing with disabilities that we don't just think of disability as one umbrella where it's a one size fits all.
Okay.
I always say, if you've met one person with disability, you've met one person with disability. That's just one experience. That's one disability experience, and it doesn't speak for everybody with a disability. And so when you say, what resources are important, the question is to who? The resources that are important to, for instance, Mr. Danami Basharu here will probably not be the resources that are important to me. And so I think that we need to take that question, bearing in mind what the unique challenges that each disability cluster faces are. So for instance, when everything went digital, right? When COVID happened and we all went online, people with hearing impairments started to really complain about the lack of closed captioning on, some free versions of most of the apps that we're using. For someone like me, my question was, now the question, everybody assumes I can use my hands to mute and unmute myself. What if my hands are not working at this point? What happens with all of this online schooling thing? So there's no right or wrong answers. There's no homogeneous answer as to what would help anybody be successful. It's about what are the unique needs of the person that's standing in front of you. Because the fact that we even have the same disability, for instance, I always jokingly say that if you've met one person with cerebral palsy, you've only met one person with cerebral palsy. If you line up 15 people with my condition here, we'll all need different things. So it's important as a people and as we plan that we think about all the different ways we could be excluding people. And that's how to think inclusively. In all of those things that we're doing, what are the different ways that we could be excluding people? So it's, if this person was, so it's doing a walkthrough in your mind. If this person was visually impaired, would they be able to access this thing fully? If they were hearing impaired, would they be able to access this thing fully? If they had low vision, if they had mobility challenges, or what if, they had, for instance, what we call developmental issues. I've been looking at this slide and it's been very, very distracting because it's way too bright, right? So for someone with a different disability, that could be the entire reason they couldn't even be sitting up here. So it's important that we think through and do walkthroughs in our minds and think about all the ways we could be excluding people. And that's how we're making sure that we're removing the barriers that are stopping people from being active participants in social life and in every area of life.
Fantastic. So we're looking at either learner-centered or person-centered social constructs instead of the homogeneous construct that we usually use. So let me explain a little bit. When you're looking at person-centered, it's what Toby just talked about. You're looking at that particular individual, or you're talking about learner-centered. You're looking at that particular learner and what is suitable for that particular person. And you're not generalizing and thinking that every person with disability belongs to the same group. And that's why we have different clusters. When we talk about different clusters, we're talking about different groups, so you have people with developmental challenges, you have people with intellectual challenges, you have people with mental illness, you also have people who are mobility challenged, you have people who are deaf, you have people who are blind and all that. And within those same clusters, you have subgroups, okay? So it's very important to know that. We'll just go to the next one. Do you think that the social and human rights model of disability have successfully replaced the older models of charity and medical models of disability in Africa? If not, what do you think can be done?
Thank you for that question.
So before I go into that, when we're talking about the charity model, how many of you have seen someone with any kind of disability and you've gone like, Shea? So that's like pity, and even when somebody has a lot of skills and all that, you want to patronize a person, you just find out that you're not giving the person the same level of recognition as someone without disability, because you just give, even if the person says my charge is like 1 million naira, you're like, really? How come? So it's like you throw something at the person. That's charity. Charity doesn't take even anybody anywhere. It just keeps them dependent. The medical one is, you're looking at it from the medical perspective. And that's why up till today, when you talk about autism, a lot of people just think that, it's not a medical problem. I have a friend who runs an autism foundation, and she fought with the River State, Ministry of Health, because they kept telling her that they don't recognize autism as, a disability. They don't even understand that it has medical implications. So those are some of the challenges that even people in the space go through. So the question, I'll repeat the question again, and it goes hand in hand with question 4. Do you think that the models have been replaced, as charity and medical have been replaced by rights and social models in Africa?
Thank you very much. Madam Larry, I am a chartered accountant, a member of National Association of Persons with Physical Disability. I was actually born with congenital deformity for my left leg. It is so unfortunate in this part of the world, persons with disability are still being seen or perceived as objects of pity, victims of circumstance, and we are being seen as someone that needs help. I'm going to give a real life scenario of what I experienced here. For instance, if any of my members who have who is on wheelchair for a program like this, it's very, very difficult for the person to access this podium, for instance. So hence, you need to start helping the person. So that's what we are pushing for, accessibility. You need to first of all remove the barriers, and that will enable the person to be independent. We don't have to depend on anybody, but we can do things. Recently, during the Easter festival, I decided to go to one of the shopping malls. So after doing my normal shopping, I went to the counter to make it. So there was this, and the Lagos State Special People's Law and the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Law actually make a lot of robust provision, And it says, in a queue, persons with disability should be attended to. These are the part of the human rights about. So when I got there, there was you and there was this man who was being attended to, and the man was like, he's only going to give me that privilege because of my condition. Now, this is where RC model comes. They look at you, they just pity you. And this pity party limits the ability of persons with disability to perform. When I was growing up, I played football, my condition, even do love it, because there is no this pity party of a thing. Now, once you begin to have pity on persons with disability, you demoralize them. You won't allow them to bring out the best.
Dehumanize.
Dehumanize them, yeah. We won't be able to bring out the best in them. A fortnight ago, it was evening, I was using the overhead beggar. So my phone rang, so I decided to stop, pick my call. So a lady was passing by and she saw me. Then the next thing, she puts her hand into her pockets, like giving me arms. You understand? So that's just the kind of environment or the kind of society in which we found ourselves. And let's realize that, wow, obviously I'm a person with disability, but that doesn't mean. But we need to begin to have a change of narrative about persons with disability, that we are not beggar, we're not helpless. Like, so we can do things our way. And another thing you need to look at the person before the ability of that person first. I actually wanted to become an auditor, but I had this discrimination at different places of work. Because the first thing they will tell me, most of this employee labor in this audit firm, is that how will I perform? It's a kind of pity of it, that how will you perform in the field? You need to move around, go to different clients, how will you do it? This kind of thing actually made them not even give me the job, thereby affecting me negatively, you understand? And I could remember I did an interview with one of this company at Apapa after the old spring exercise. I was supposed to go and meet with the MD, just for the MD to know me, because I've actually passed through all the. So the MD saw me here in Ikeja and was like having pity on me, that how will I cope with the traffic in Apapa of a thing. So till now, it's been over 2014. I'm yet to get anything. So we need to take away this pity part of it. And also, we need to begin to make all structures accessible to persons with disability. And also, we need to engage with different stakeholders, even the grassroots level. We need to begin to engage with market women. We need to begin to engage with community leaders. And then we also need to begin to, we know the power of these religious leaders. Yeah, so let me stop.
Okay. Tobiloba, I'll just ask you the next question because we're running out of time. It's similar. They're all around the same area.
Okay.
Okay. So I know that you were very much involved in the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Act 2018. Mr. Danlami was also involved. We worked behind the scenes. I had talks with Mr. Danlami over and over again over it. The reason why this particular question is here is because my state, Rivers State, passed the disability law since 2013. We've done all sorts of things to see how it can be implemented. Nothing has come out of it, I can tell you for free. Now, 5-year moratorium, we're almost running out. The question is, will it become another obsolete or redundant act in Nigeria? What do you suggest that stakeholders can do to ensure that that doesn't happen? And does it really address the social and rights model, that particular act? Does it really address it the way it is, constructed?
So I'll start from the end of the question. Does the act address the social and rights model? Yes, it does. Because Mr. Danlami remembers the amount of hard work that went into trying to make sure that it actually did focus on the rights and social model as opposed to the charity and medical model. Now, again, as with most laws in Nigeria, a lot of it does not, the thing is that it's hard to contextualize because a lot of the content is basically borrowed.
From the Convention on the Rights of
It's
Persons with
borrowed.
Disabilities.
And well, it's, reads great. Nigerian laws read great. We have probably the best written laws in actually most of the world. And I'm serious. I have a master's degree in international law, trust me. I have read documents. Nigeria writes laws that are beautifully written. The question is that when we are done writing it, is it contextualized enough for us to be able to implement it? The reality in Nigeria, the way the average Nigerian thinks, will they even be able to understand what that law is trying to say? Because we're in a society that religion, right, and culture, and all of these things that's played a role in how we view things. I mean, even I was listening to the Tech Hub panel and we're talking about violence against women. And I was laughing because I know that the place that religion plays in all of that, they'll tell you the reason she got raped is because she was wearing skimpy things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what they're going to tell you. If she was a virtuous woman, we'll be having this conversation. Those are the places of religion and culture. And that's the same thing with disability rights, right? So if we have a 5-year moratorium that's running out. If we're going to see anyway, okay, let me come back. I live in Lagos. Lagos was the first state to pass a disability law. It's been over a decade. So on paper, right, Lagos ticks a lot of boxes. Lagos has ramps. Lagos has inclusive units in public schools. Lagos has the 5% in employment. Question: as a person with disabilities, sir, how many of the Lagos State ramps can you use? I'm sure you're trying to count because most of them are inaccessible to you. But somebody has ticked a box and said, we've built ramps. Until we educate the people that will implement these laws, they will be there. You might even have a state like Lagos that tries to be the first among the best of implementing things, but it would still be useless because it is still not human-centered design. We're ticking boxes. So it's important that as stakeholders, we sit, and all of us have to decide. If you're in the tech space and you're saying, okay, my own is I want to make sure tech is accessible. Sit there and decide this is the hill I want to die on. The truth is that we're all trying to do it all, and that's why nothing is working. We all need to pick a sector and say, this is the sector I want to make accessible. I've picked education. They know me, Lagos. This is the hill we are going to die on. We're going to make inclusive education a reality in Lagos, and not just the paper one, the real practice. And that's what needs to happen. Or else we'll have an act that's beautiful in almost all our states, but the implementation will still be useless to the people we think the act is supposed to serve. And so it's all of us being able to say, this is what we want to do, and then deciding to do it and take it sector by sector instead of trying to do all at once. Trying to do all at once is the simple way of doing nothing.
Okay. So, but because we have to hurry up to get to the next session, okay? One of the challenges that we have faced in the development space is that right now we're still facing it. I was able to get a small grant from our organization to organize training for 50 youths with and without disabilities, because that's just like she said, you take the paths that you're really, going to work on. So when we do any training, we focus mostly on digital training, because we believe that that's the space for persons with disabilities. That's where a lot of the discrimination can be removed once they focus on it. But one of the major challenges that we have had is that whenever we're about to do a training, it becomes so expensive, because for persons with disabilities, you have to give them transportation. It has become a right. Right now, we have a space for 10 people. We're struggling to even fill that space. Last year, we had a space for 50 50. We started off with about 30 and it went down to 15. So the question I have is this, so that people in the audience will understand. Is it true that there's a strong bi-directional link between poverty and disability? If this is true, how does it limit people with disabilities from participating fully in development and enjoying the development process? Anybody can answer it.
1 minute answer. So poverty is both a cause and an effect of disability, right? So a cause because a lot of the times people that acquire disabilities, especially in Nigeria, acquire it because they were poor. I've seen people who went blind, not because the glaucoma they had could not have been treated, but because they couldn't afford it, because we don't have public health care. Healthcare cost is out of pocket. And then of course, you know, it's also an effect because then when you are disabled, your cost of living quadruples. So it doesn't matter how much money you're making, you're making it and you're spending it because, for instance, you're a person with a disability. You're not, for most part, you can't jump down 4 buses, which means you're sitting there taking Uber while your mates jumping down for and saving money. It means that if you need to hire help while your mates are able to do things themselves, you're paying that cost. Your healthcare costs have astronomically gone up. And so it's both a cause and an effect of disability. And the truth is that until we remove the reasons why it's a cause, e.g., our bad healthcare, we will continue to, run this cycle.
Yeah, very quickly.
All right. Well, I will include some points to what my sister said. Lots of jobs contributed to poverty among the persons with disability. Also, a lot of life challenges come in. Well, when they lost their job, it's difficult to get new jobs because employers of labor, they are a burden to them. For example, the DRIF, we need interpreters to function effectively. That costs more money. Our phone, the blind will require guides and all that too. While persons on mobility challenge will require assistance to move around. No right to move the building. So all those and with other challenges will make it difficult for employers to hire that or disabled persons. Now, contributing to their state of poverty. Mostly maybe in Nigeria here, but in the US, the situation is different. Why? Because there's employers of people are so now, of course, the responsibility to advocate for legislation implementation to favor persons with disabilities like us. Honestly, don't say you can't do no. One is no. I don't feel about the same no. Or so you're saying in schools or I don't answer. On paper. But the question is, where would you implement it? Question. Our country is full of funny games. We are good at talking, but bad in acting or implementing things. So all of us to go out and please reflect and advocate for us. Nobody the government, so please help us on out of our Wagner. Understand? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with him. I totally agree with Dr. Gabriel. I always say in all my meetings, there's a thin line between ability and disability. I've met a lot of people who, due to accidents, have become persons with disabilities. I would have been carrying a colostomy I had a traumatic experience in 2010, and my intestines were punctured. I got infected, and it was just 1 inch away from my colon. If it had gotten into my colon, I would have been carrying a colostomy today. So it's very real. There's a very thin line. And if you also look at yourself, those of you that wear glasses, you know that you're also visually impaired to some extent. We can't do everything. Everyone is differently enabled. So bear that in mind when you're relating with persons with disabilities. So the last question in this session has to do with something that is very sensitive, and that's the language that is used. And it's part of the new phrase in disability inclusion. It talks about personhood. Especially, it's something that is becoming more popular in the Western world, where they believe that the names that you call someone with disabilities is also an infringement on their rights. And do you think that the language sometimes used to describe persons with disabilities is an infringement on the rights of persons with disabilities? If so, what are some of the proper phrases you recommend should be used when addressing persons with disabilities? Okay, so Mr. Danlami, I think you should take that.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you help us? Where is she?
Yeah, thank you. I titled this Words Matter. Undeniably, the language that we refer to persons with disabilities has an impact as it shapes our perception of the world. Inappropriate language can make people feel excluded or offended. The use of derogatory or inappropriate language may amount to discrimination and impinge on the enjoyment of human rights. By adopting language that celebrates the human diversity, we will contribute to strengthening the human rights model of disability and creating a more inclusive society. People first language is the most widely accepted language for referring to persons with disabilities. And I mean, by people first language, I mean that when you refer to a person with disability, that means you are referring to the person first and not the disability. That is why we say persons with disabilities. But when some people say disabled person, and that is wrong for us in Nigeria. So we talk of persons with disabilities as used in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, rather than disabled. For example, we can use expressions such as children with albinism, students with dyslexia, women with intellectual disabilities, and of course, persons with disabilities. But how do we describe persons with disabilities in various languages in Nigeria? I'm sure that's going to be a very big, it's going to be a long story because the conversation. We have different words we use to refer to persons with disabilities, which are very, very derogatory. And I won't like to mention them here for now because it will take me a long time to discuss that. Now, disability is a part of life. Disability is a part of life and of human diversity. So it's not something to be dramatized or sensationalized. Persons with disabilities should therefore not be portrayed as inspirational or superhuman. There's no need to describe persons with disabilities as courageous or brave or as having overcome their disability. These are patronizing and should be avoided. Persons with disabilities are the same as everyone else in terms of talents and abilities. There are some expressions which you use that are inappropriate for softening disability. So we should avoid such terms as differently able. There's nothing like that. don't, because also people of all abilities, disability, or people of determination, as they are all euphemistic and can be, someone is telling me people with special needs. I mean, that's a very wrong terminology, and it's very common in Nigeria, because they are all euphemistic and patronizing and offensive. For example, differently able is problematic because some advocates know that we are all differently able in one way or the other. So euphemisms are in fact a denial of reality and a way to avoid talking about disability. The medical model of disability views disability as a health condition that needs to be fixed or cured, where persons with disabilities are not seen as rights holders. Also, the charity model of disability views disability as a burden or a problem that persons without disabilities must solve. This approach of persons with disabilities has been objects of charity and pity, perpetuating negative attitudes and stereotypes. Persons with disabilities should not be referred to as patients unless they are under medical care. We should also avoid labeling persons with disabilities by their diagnosis. For example, dyslexic, as this reflects the medical model of disability. Use people first language instead. Example, persons with dyslexia or has dyslexia. The term victim should not be used unless strictly relevant. It is inappropriate to say that a person is a victim of cerebral palsy. For example, cerebral palsy does not make the person a victim. A victim is a person who has been harmed by a crime or has been subjected to human rights violations. Victims are often seen as vulnerable or helpless. So let us try to avoid using all these terms that I've used. Let us use the proper term for a person with disability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very enlightening indeed. So we'll go to the second panel. If anybody has a question, okay. Okay, just 3 questions, please. Okay. It's mine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is a very interesting conversation. The work that I do is on economic empowerment. Before now, I would have said, what has governance or politics to do with what we are talking about? But the truth is, we cannot separate politics and governance from everything we are doing. In digital inclusion, there's governance. But I was wondering, as people, sorry, so I'll not use the wrong language. Persons with disability, because I was wondering, because in the work we are doing, we see a lot of vulnerable people, but you still see that there's a lot of potentials in them. So there is ability in every disability. So I was wondering if, as part of your contribution to the forthcoming election, in terms of the fact that we have a lot of voter apathy, have you mobilized yourselves in your various communities to find a way to register to vote? And can you show proof of that so that, you know, we solve the problem of people coming out to vote on election day? That's my question. So that is not, because I observed that you are talking about what the government will do, what we will do, what all of us will do. What about what all of us will do, including you? You know, have you registered? How much of you have you registered? How many amongst you have registered to vote? And we commit to coming out that day
to make sure that you vote for the right person to be in government.
Thank you. Anybody can answer that.
So it's very interesting when people automatically shift. So once you call out people, and this is it's a very interesting response. You shift the responsibility back to the person who's pointing out something that's actually good, which is what you've just done. But I will answer the question. There's an entire organization called Inclusive Friends Association that has been working on one thing and one thing only: inclusive elections. And that's an organization that is run by people with disability. They were the ones that made sure that we had a Braille ballot paper in this country that allows people that are visually impaired to vote without assistance, so that they actually exercise their secret ballot. So yes, people with disabilities are doing a lot to ensure that we're able to exercise our franchise to vote and be voted for. But as long as those who should remove the barriers to participation and presence don't do so. For instance, if you put my polling unit in a 3-story building on the 3rd floor, it doesn't matter that I have registered to vote. It doesn't matter that I came out. What matters is that you disenfranchise me from voting by making sure it's inaccessible to me. So yes, people with disabilities do a lot to ensure that we're able to vote, but we cannot remove the part that needs to be played by those who should remove the barriers to presence and participation for people with disabilities.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's very important. The important thing is that we have done everything that is necessary to be done. But unfortunately, persons with disabilities will never be counted. When you have voter forms for people with for elective offices be at 100 million naira, 40 million naira, how do you expect a person with disability to get even 10,000 naira? So I mean, all these are against us. So unless we have a fair and free and just method of voting, accessible methods of voting, we cannot have that opportunity at all. So we are being shut out completely. Thank you.
Okay, so we don't really have time. When we finish the next session, whatever time that PIN decides to give to us, then we would assign. But let me just say something here. We have women. Has any woman become a president in Nigeria? No. How many women have become governors in Nigeria? So we have more women in Nigeria than we have persons with disabilities. And I can tell you, because I've worked with Dan Lamy behind the scenes, and I can tell you that, yes, they say we shouldn't say they're heroes, they're inspirational, but it's difficult not to say that. It's extremely difficult not to say that. I need to apologize for that, but it's extremely difficult not to say that. I know what persons with disabilities go through because I work with them. Let me give you a typical example before I get emotional. We had a deaf photographer, and there was a day she went for an event and there was a stampede. The next thing, she saw herself in a drainage. She couldn't hear what was going on. Nobody even thought about how to protect her. So somebody will say, okay, what did she do to get a skill? She has gotten a skill. Does the society recognize the fact that she's deaf? And when something like that is happening, they should pay attention to her. In the Disability Act, it's there in emergency situations. You know, so when we want to, I don't want you to feel offended, but when we're talking about these issues, when you want to ask the question, ask it from a point of view, like you want to find out, okay, is there an organization that is involved in this? I'd like to know more about them so that I can support. Okay, because a lot of these challenges, I beg, let me not go there. Because even when Dalami and we went for the high level, I remember they refused to sponsor him because the Ministry of Women Affairs hijacked that trip and refused to give them funding. Funding that is supposed to come to them. You know, they went, we saw them there at the UN. They couldn't even answer any questions. So please, let's not go there, okay? Let's go to the next session. After the next session, if you have questions, I don't want to offend anybody. I know we're all here to learn, but please let the questions also be asked in such a way that it doesn't defeat the purpose of our being here. So digital inclusion for persons with disabilities. Could you help our panelists, please? Thank you. Give them a round of applause. Group photograph. Okay, group photograph, please. Okay. Okay, so for this session, we have Ms. Ngozi Okpai. Ms. Ngozi Okpai. We can go through that end so that, yes. Okay, I should have actually asked Toby to stay back. Toby, I'm so sorry. Ms. Ngozi Okpai, Ms. Toby Loba, Mr. Okpaolu, Mr. Ekundayo. Okay, he's coming. Where's Mr. Ekundayo? Okay, right here. Okpaolu, okay. He'll be here soon. But we'll get started right away. Digital inclusion for persons with disabilities. Before we go into this session, I just want to say that I've worked with persons with disabilities for over 11 years. And one of the persons who has really assisted me in this regard is Mr. Dan Lamin, because I didn't really know much about the technical aspects and all that. He has been such a great mentor and very willing to support. He's a member of our advisory committee on disability issues, you know. And very early on, I realized that one of the ways that persons with disabilities can quickly become independent is when they have digital skills. And that's why over the years, we focus more on that than any other thing, you know, apart from, you know, just asking questions like you want to do a program, have you thought about persons with disabilities in your design stage and all that? But also ensuring that they're equipped with digital skills so that they don't have to depend on other people so much for help. So we just dive right in. How can stakeholders ensure that an enabling environment is created for digital inclusion to thrive for persons with disabilities?
Okay, so stakeholders. That's a very vague term. Because what each stakeholder needs to do, again, needs to be, what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of needs to be individualized to the disability. So say, for instance, we're talking about digital inclusion in, so let's say fintech. When we think about fintech, we need to think about, you know, are your apps, for instance, are they voice enabled for the visually impaired, right? Is there a way that if I have limited use of my fingers, I'm not disenfranchised using your fintech apps? And that's just an example with fintech. If you're in digital literacy, I always have fun actually poking the digital literacy guys. But every time they come around and say digital literacy, I say, please, so have you guys figured out how to help those of us who have trouble using our hands on this digital literacy business. I see them freeze because they have never thought about the fact that there are people who cannot use their fingers. There's an assumption that you should be able to use your hand if you are going to use technology. So again, it needs to be, stakeholders need to stop, like I said earlier, and think, what are the current barriers in the way that we're doing what we're doing that are keeping people with disabilities out? And what do we need to do to remove it? And I know that for a lot of people, because the mindset of around disabilities, around charity, they stop to say, oh, well, how does this benefit me? The truth is that we need to begin to see people with disabilities, not just as objects of charity, but as people who are consumers and therefore people who pay for these services. If the services are not accessible to me, I'm not going to pay for it. So it's important that we think about people with disabilities as customers instead of recipients of charity. And maybe that will force us to think about how we're disenfranchising them and therefore leaving money on the table.
Fantastic, because it's estimated that we have about 1 billion people in the world with disabilities, the highest marginalized group in the world, and about 30 million Nigerians living with various types of disabilities. So yes, I seriously believe that, people lose more when they don't consider the fact that persons with disabilities are paying for these services. That takes me back to the fact that we're trying to get, one of the tech companies to come here to be part of this session so that they will be able to hear from our panelists, some of the challenges that they face using their, services or their applications. I remember one time I approached one of the telco companies and I was trying to get them to be more disability inclusive in terms of their apps. For example, like text to speech, because we were, relating or working more with the deaf. We wanted a situation where, they can write a text and then somebody would be able to, an app will be able to say what they're writing, because the deaf most of the time writes the way that they sign. So for somebody who is not in that space and you're reading what a deaf person has written, sometimes it's difficult to really comprehend what they're saying. And I remember approaching one of the telco companies here in Nigeria to see what they could do. And they told me point blank that they didn't see a commensurate reason, Yes, they didn't see a commensurate return on investment, so these are some of the things that we go through in this particular space. Information technology is considered as an essential facilitator of social inclusion for persons with disabilities. What technological trends can be used to support the social integration of individuals with disabilities?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ngozi Upayokoro, and I'm community specialist for Project Enable Africa and also the co-founder of Project Enable Africa. I also work as the alumni engagement for the alumni network of Project Enable Africa. Okay, so a brief one, visually impaired. So I became blind through meningitis. And so the process of, I was a child, I could see very well. I had a lot of aspirations. I had a lot of big dreams of being the doctor and the lawyer and all that. And as at 10, when I lost my sight, it felt like the whole world was crashing and all. And I want to come back or start with technology. They say makes things easy for everybody. But for persons with disability, technology makes things possible. And so being a blind girl, I had a lot of fears. Part of the fears, I was transiting from a child to adolescent. So one of my fears was, hey, would I ever have a boyfriend? Would I ever? Okay, so it's sad. So that's one of it. And, would I ever be? I know I had a lot of friends, those age 10, 12, 13, they were already having guys talking to them and asking them out and all. So I was even having to deal with the fact that I can't see. I lost most of my friends. And, it was not even more complicating because I could not see partially. So it was like, are you blind or you can see? At some point, I was like, I don't even know. I really do not know what it is. Several times I've had to cry that God, just make me totally blind. Let me just know that I can't see, because it's always very difficult asking for help because they'll look at you very well that, are you sure you're not lying or so? So coming to the social integration, there were a lot of fears. I had fears of, will I be able to move out, go out on my own? Will I be able to even, I was already thinking of when I get pregnant, how will I be able to go for antenatal care? These were my fears as a child. But when I was able to understand what information and technology is, and I want to also make mention of, I have my computer trainer right beside me, Mr. Opeolu. Yes, so I need to really acknowledge the fact that he really trained me to be a computer literate. And so what I do now is, when I understood how to use the computer, how to use my phone, I became a bit independent. I could do transaction on my own. I could go out. Thank God for the technologies we have. You could book a ride to go out. You could do seamlessly anything you want to do because technology has made it possible for us. And also with the digital space, digital assistants, we talk about, okay, Google, you could ask Google to, please, Google, help me search for this, and he or she answers you fast. We have Siri. Siri could also be very funny, and they are very helpful. Yes, and you have Alexia and all that. So these are what every other person would just see as is luxury. But for persons with disabilities, it's a very important tool. And technologies like that, for visually impaired persons, you want to wonder, I can conveniently be in a WhatsApp group when they send me lots of pictures, because I have my app that would convert it to text for me. That's Kibo. I have my screen reader. So most times when I'm using my computer, it feels like, hey, how is she seeing this? How is she doing? Like, please just give me the work to do. Let me just give you results. That's what you need. So how I'm using it, I use my screen reader to do it and all. But technology has made it possible, because I remember the first time I got a laptop or a computer, I was scared of even touching it. And it takes me back to how families and friends could also treat you. So before I learned how to use the computer, I had this uncle. Oh God, he's watching. Hopefully he's not. So he had a system, and I was watching a short clips with this system. And all of a sudden, the video was ended. And my little cousin was about maybe 5 or 6. I think I was about 12 or 13 then. So my little cousin now switched it off. I was so amazed, like, how did he even do it? How did he just off it and all? So my uncle came and asked, who shuts the system? I was already shivering that, hey, God, oh. Then the boy said, no, it's me. And he said, better, because he knows me, I can't do anything. At that point, I said to myself, this laptop, I will so learn it. I'll be a guru in it, and I'll even teach him. That's what I said to myself, and I think I worked at it. Years back, about 3-4 years back, my uncle I got the same exact system that he was using as at then, and he had to always come, please, could you help me do this? Could you help me type this? And it's a success story to me, yes. And so I can say I've been able to train other persons, visually impaired persons, on how to use the computer. And even in the space I am, I encounter a lot of persons with different disability. So when we're talking in the first section, we're talking about the disability clusters and how the light is affecting some people and all. Then someone beside me over there said, this inclusion sounds like hard thing. I was like, it sounds like it, but it is achievable when you really, really just understand different spectrums of disability. Now, talking about the technology, there are different assistive technology that will really aid persons with disability. And like what Madam Tobiloba said in the first session, you don't, because you've seen one person with disability, you don't generalize that is what it is. What might be my need, might be someone else, might be totally different from someone else. Visually impaired, and a blind person will have different needs. This light might affect me, this light might not affect some other person. So it's always very good to ask them, how may we help? What's technology, or how can we be of help to you? And this is not being sympathetic at all. It's being empathetic, like, how can I help you? So you see someone on, there are lots of deaf persons that can actually still communicate. They can read lips and all. So you want to ask, how do you want me to help you, and stuff like that. So talking about the technology, we could just work on the existing technologies. Like for boats, I was really considering it. I took a ride, yesterday. I took a ride yesterday somewhere, and apparently the guy stopped. He dropped someone in the office, and I was booking the ride going. So he saw a lot of persons with disability and all, and he noticed that I couldn't just see well. And the next thing he asked me is, what thing do you for eye? And I'm like, okay. I don't think I was even in the mood to even have any conversation or to enlighten anybody. I told him nothing. I work in disability space. I was just trying to act professional. And he started asking a lot of weird questions and all, that he's a counselor, I should share his problem. God is going to do it for me. I'm like, please excuse me, sir. Can you just take me to where I'm going to? Please. I booked this ride. I came out to enter myself. So please, let's just face this trip and go. So that's one part of the journey that can be. And that's another one experience of a boat.
Stop here for
Yes,
you.
I'm sorry, I'm just wrong.
We have
So-
10 minutes more for
Okay, sorry.
everybody.
So I think for boat rides, what they could add is a column or somewhere there you could ask, are you a person with disability, or how inclusive can driver be to you, and stuff like that. So we could work on existing technology. And also I want to make mention of the web content and accessibility guidelines. These are what makes web content accessible for persons with disability. So when you are creating your web content or web pages, you want to ensure that it's accessible for every other person to read through. That's the web content accessibility guidelines. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so rapid digitalization is creating challenges and opportunities. Those who could benefit the most from learning digital skills are people with disabilities, with the potential to improve their social inclusion. What do you suggest tech companies that provide free digital skills for young people could do to become more disability inclusive? I think, okay. Okay, you want to answer it? Oh, Ekundayo, okay.
My name is Shejoro Ekundayo. I'm the CEO of Inclusive News Network, also a member of Deaf Association and JONAPID, Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities. To make sure that digital training are provided and improved for is that they should train persons with disabilities. I mean, the young people. There is need for making everything accessible for people with disabilities. They have to make sure that the first people that will provide the training have to look and see people with disabilities as human. They have to see that, yes, they can do many things. They have many potentials to do so many things. They have so many abilities. So what they are doing is that they have to make it accessible for people with disabilities and make it inclusive. For example, in the workplace, they have to make sure that people with disabilities are inclusive. Like when they are doing training, they have to make sure that a person with disabilities are included to see that, to look for experience and opinion of persons with disabilities in that workplace. And also, they have to look, when they want to employ or provide employment for people, they have to look at making their website inclusive. For example, the blind persons, we need audio to help them to learn what is on the website, to see that, yeah, they are also inclusive. And also for the deaf person, you see that some deaf people may not read very well. But by making sure that sign language is provided in the video, so that they themselves too can learn what is going on their websites. And also, in the words format, their website have to make sure that the words color, the contrast are also in size that will help persons with disabilities and those with low vision, so that they can see what they are providing for them. It is important. What is important is that persons with disabilities needs to be included in everything and making everything accessible for persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Various legislations at the national, regional, and international level support Article 30 of the Tunis Commitment of 2005. Article 30. The use of ICTs in all stages of education, training, and human resource development should be promoted, taking into account the special needs of persons with disabilities and disadvantaged and vulnerable groups. In your role as an educator, what is the plight of students with disabilities in Africa? That's for you, Okpolo. No, it's not you. No, when we had the meeting, we agreed that we're just going to throw out the question, because if we say each person should have their time, there will be no time. Okay, just combine it to the one that you were supposed to guess. I decided to change that because Toby had already answered part of your question, so it's more like a repeat. Sorry about that. No, you can sit.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Okweolu Akinola. I am an assistive technology consultant and a member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. I'm a CEO of Access Tech Innovation, and I pioneered computer training for blind persons in Nigeria in the early 90s. Yes, this is about technology. Firstly, I will shock everybody by saying that technology is not technical. It sounds ironical, but actually it's cultural, it's social, it's economic. There are so many things that come into play. Firstly, when we talk of education, education is about information. Education, the purpose of education is to prepare people for participation in the society at different levels. And so technology has to meet the kind of aspirations of the society. What are the values of the society and all that? And when it comes to persons with disabilities now, how do those people fit into the system in which technology is being applied? I said technology is not technical. And I'll put it this, okay, some time ago I had to do a job in Ondo State, and I found out that they had supplied the wrong things, despite the fact that they actually asked me when they were making the procurement. I told them this is what to buy, and they bought exactly the wrong thing. And I said it, and somebody there, who I later learned her husband was the contractor, and he had inflated the thing so much, and it's something of 200,000. They bought it for about 4.5 million, and it was even the wrong thing. And she said, "Who even made you a consultant? Get out of here. We're not even paying all your bills and everything." And so it became a jar. It became fight just because I was telling them what was right. So when we're thinking of children with disabilities, we have to look at what kinds of skills. What is the curriculum? Now, what is the curriculum trying to put into the minds of these learners? And then what kind of learning aids will ensure that that skill level, that skill type that we're trying to impart on all learners, not just the learner with disabilities, can get to this person with disabilities. And we don't consider, those are things to consider. Second thing is personnel. Do we have people who can handle the learning aids? In Nigeria today, we have a school for special persons, I think, Federal College of Education, Special Oyo. And I've spent about 3 decades trying to fight that school because their curriculum is obsolete and they're not producing anything that will help children with disabilities to learn. Most of the lecturers in Oyo cannot use computers. I've been using computers for over 30 years. I don't understand it. And they want to teach the youth who are going to compete in the labor market with every other person in the digital world. So I said technology is not technical. It is not. Anyway, so that is it. That is the first thing we ought to consider. So I'll go back. What do we think about when we are thinking of getting technology to persons with disabilities? I've said the first one. Firstly, we must understand that accessibility and technology work hand in hand. If technology is not accessible, it is useless. And it is not just about persons with disabilities. When you say disabilities, what do you mean disabilities? There are people, okay, we look at people who have seizures. Do you, as a person, consider someone who is epileptic, who lives with epilepsy? Do you consider that kind of person a person with disability? They are, because they have seizures. And technology can trigger seizures. I don't know if you know that. If these lights here were blinking and somebody who is prone to seizures is here, the person is likely to get a seizure. And so these are things. So when you design websites, someone was, the last session, the first ever session, that was before the disability session, I had Benga talking about platforms. And I said, yeah, that's it. He was talking about platforms from another angle, about contents and all that. But I'm talking about accessibility. Ngozi mentioned the W3 accessibility AI guidelines. Look at the website, you design a website, you make it so beautiful and everything, and then you put all these blinking icons and all that, and you don't realize that you've cut up a very large percentage of your users from your website. Because persons, I just mentioned people who have epilepsy. What are people with intellectual disabilities? Sorry, the temperature here is a bit cold for me. I don't know why I didn't come with a jacket today. So maybe my voice is sounding a bit shaky. But I'll try my best to be, maybe I should stand so that I'll be a bit warm. I don't know, is there allowed to stand? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay, so I was saying accessibility and technology. So when you talk of technology and disability, it is not just about being blind, not about being deaf. There are some things, there are hidden disabilities. There are even, every day, new disabilities are being discovered. There are things, and technology is even bringing out some. There are the people who call digitally disabled. They are persons with disabilities in their own right. And someone was mentioning the fact that some people cannot use their hands and legs very well, and they have to engage with technology. Those kind of people use their mouths. I know somebody who is totally paralyzed from her neck downwards, and she's a technology expert. Now, what she does, she just uses her eyes to use technology. She blinks, that's all she can do. So we have what we call switches. Because at the end of the day, computer is binary. It's either a yes or a no. So it's either your eye is blinked or it's not blinked, huh? And that's what is riding on. So we have this consideration. Secondly, laws. Recent research shows that even the big tech companies, and I'm talking of people like Microsoft, Google, and co, that research shows that they comply with accessibility and technology accessibility only because, or mainly because, there are laws that they have to abide by. And if they don't abide by those laws, they will be penalized. So talk of consequences. Because there are consequences for inaccessibility, companies are spending a lot of money in making sure that the premises and their technology are accessible. And like in everything else, accessibility is something you don't retrofit. It doesn't work. It's more expensive for you, and usually you don't achieve the maximum standards that way. Same thing with technology. So making technology accessible to persons with disabilities starts from the design stage, starts from the planning stage. We talked, Ngozi was mentioning Syria and all those. Do you know that there are people I know that people are employed in Apple? That's full-time employment. The only thing they do is to monitor Siri and how Siri interacts with people and to see how they can improve on it. Siri, that a lot of people in Nigeria don't even know exists.
Thank you so much. We've overshot our time. Okay, so we have 5 minutes for questions. We have 5 minutes for questions, but the big summary of all of the things that we have said today is the fact that technology doesn't make things easier for persons with disabilities, it makes things possible. And so for people who are designing, design with persons with disabilities in mind from the design stage. So I'm going to give priority to those who had questions before, but please go straight to the point. And then my panelists, when you're answering, you have just 30 seconds to answer. I don't know how possible that is. I know I was right there with her before I had to walk away, so.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say thank you to the organizers. Thank you. Okay, so basically, for the disability rights or laws, I want to ask if it's been taught in schools for children to know and be aware that there are opportunities available to them, because I have a younger brother who is also deaf and dumb, and deaf, forgive me, he's deaf. He doesn't speak yet. Okay, so, and honestly, this is the first time I'm knowing about these opportunities that are out there, because we've never really had this opportunity. And today is the first time I'm finding out why he didn't want to go to the college at Oyo State. Right now, he's just somewhere and he's in school, yeah, but I don't know what to do after he comes out of school. I don't know if he can get job opportunities. Sometimes he sends me some numbers to say, okay, call this person and ask them if I can work with them. Then on the digital space, he's good with art and crafts. So I want to find out how can someone like him come up with his skills? How can he develop it? How can he get something doing? Thank you.
Very quickly, that's the space in which I work. Last year, we trained some people, and one of them, a deaf guy, he did graphic design. He's an artist. His works are on social media, and he's selling his artwork on social media. He designs, and he's a fantastic designer, okay? So, like we said, the digital space is one area that, you can get him focused on. So if you can handle graphic design, that's something that he can also do, okay? Sorry, I have to rush it. The next question.
Good afternoon. Working in an educational institution, I have not seen an initiative from this organization within our schools. I work with Yabatech, to be precise, and there are persons with disabilities, but they are not aware of these opportunities. 1, 2, some people have been emotionally discouraged. Let me use that word. They don't see beyond where they are. They don't see any, any hope for the future. They're just in school to come and study, and after then, they don't know what lies ahead of them. How can you partner with schools, Unilag, Yabatech, and the likes, so that they can be more encouraged and know that there's life after their schooling? Thank you very much.
Ngozi, please take that question.
Okay, so I would say we need to do more advocacy, because I work with Project Enable Africa, and what we do in Project Enable Africa, our office is at Surulere. We empower persons with disability with skills. We have lots of trainings we do. The one we just completed is a hospitality training, where we train persons with disability to work in the hospitality sector. We have one of our interns working here. She's physically challenged and she's working here. We have a couple of deaf persons that are working in Sheraton hotels and other hotels like that. So I believe it's more of advocacy for us on our own part, because Yabatech is close to Surulere, and we should have been aware of that. So I think maybe we'll talk about that much later privately. We could just talk about they can get connected to our programs or our projects and also get empowered. Then basically we have Lagos State Office of Disability. Okay. All right.
Hi,
Thank
good
you.
afternoon. Yeah, I'm actually going to digress a little bit from the first section. I have something to ask. Is there any platform for mental, like rehabilitation for those that are, as in, is there anything like, because some of them pointed something that somehow, like this other man, yes, he said something like, someone tried to help him out and something, and then he felt he was being pitied. Because you cannot stop people from, you cannot stop people from showing you mercy. It is normal with every human being. Once you go through things, like there's this mental.
Okay, so it's not showing them mercy. The thing is, sorry, calm down. It's not showing them mercy. It's God that shows mercy. The thing is this, like I was sharing with Tobiloba, I'm not a feminist. I like to be spoiled. In fact, I told my husband after my death experience that my name is Obiageli. I've come to eat wealth. I came back a second time to eat wealth. So I think it just depends on people's perspective and the way that you approach them. So for example, even if you want to help someone with disabilities, it depends on, like, you don't just go and hold their hand. You should ask, do you need help? Don't just go and grab their hand. If it is somebody who is mobility challenged, the crutches that he's using, they are his legs. It's like somebody coming to grab your legs. So even if you want to help him with his crutches, do you mind if I pick it up for you? And what you see as a barrier, they're just trying to be independent. So tomorrow, when you're not there, what happens? Okay, so you just need to, just the simple courtesies of, do you need help? How should I help you? It's very important, and not just assume. And even when they're with an escort or a companion, don't address the companion, address them. Because they're human beings, yes, they're human beings like you, so you address them and say, I'd like to help you with this, and give them the rights. They're not being proud. Give them the right to say, no, thank you. I don't need your help. I can manage. Okay. And if they also show you how they want to be helped, like today, I learned a lot from Tobiloba. She said, no, don't help me from my left. My right is better. And I cannot be offended if you're trying to help, there's no need for offense. If you're offended, then it means that you're not trying to help. So we have to stop it here. You can ask them, they're still around. You can ask them personally. And I'm hoping that it's not just going to stop here. And all of you have become disability inclusion advocates. Let's give it up for our panelists.
We're going to have a group photograph with all our panelists. Thank you very much for that engaging session. And I'm sure we've learned a lot when it comes to inclusion for people with disabilities. Our next session will start in earnest, and it's journalist investigations and impacts on digital identity, data, and technology in Africa. And the session is organized by the African China Reporting Project in collaboration with Paradigm Initiative. And we hosted a Digital Rights Academy last year. And part of it, we awarded 10 reporting grants to journalists in Nigeria to investigate the complex issues and developments to digital identity, data, and tech in Africa. So ahead of this, in 2019, the project supported 9 journalists in the form of reporting grants, awards, and skills training workshops on the specific elements to understanding and reporting on digital identity systems, good ID, data, and tech in Africa. So the panel will be reflecting on the impacts of the project's work in advancing on this focused coverage and the impacts of the published investigations by the awarded journalists. A book publication encompassing the investigations, workshop reports, and vast journalist resources will be available at the end of the session. The session will be moderated by Khadija El Usman. She is the Programs Officer at Paradigm Initiative, and she covers the Anglophone West Africa region. Please, let's give it up for Khadija. Khadija.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Your energy is not great. Good afternoon, everyone. You should greet me well if you want to eat lunch. Because I'm not standing between you and lunch. So this is the last session. So I'm hoping that, I know that you might be tired, bombarded with a lot of information. So I'm hoping that you would have a renewed zeal to listen and contribute for this last session so that we can go and eat together. So permit me to introduce the people I'll be speaking with today. I'll just call your name so that you come up quickly so we don't waste any time. I would be starting with Bongiwe Tutu. Please, round of applause. Thank you. Michelle Ago, Ifedayo Ogunyemi, Temitope Obayendo, and Tunde Omoleng. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need another. There, help. Okay, so if you did not know this, then I'll be worried. But the theme of DRIF in Nigeria this year was, or is, digital inclusion as where all rights begin. So Paradigm Initiative has always prided itself with bringing into the room various stakeholders. And today, I think we have done this. We have discussed data rights with businesses and civil society organizations. We discussed women and their rights online. We have discussed people with disabilities, and now we are here to discuss the media. So why is the media and journalists, why is it an important thing to talk about? Well, they have the tools to reach large numbers of people and inform them on key issues ranging from policies to elections and so on and so forth. They have radically altered the ways in which government institutions operate, the way political leaders communicate, and more. The Nigerian media, if you've ever read any About Us page of a Nigerian newspaper, they always boast of being the springboard behind Nigeria's independence and our democracy. So we see for a fact that the media is important. And I'm sure a lot of journalists in the room, them and those seated here, can agree with that. So in virtually all of the sessions that we've had, we've spoken to the need for awareness and how much people just do not know. And who else is better to help us fix that lack of awareness than the media? But as an organization, having dealt with journalists a lot, there has been a gap that we have seen, which is that a lot of journalists also do not know. So when you're having conversations about digital rights and digital inclusion, lots of journalists have also not encountered the topic. As such, when we found such a knowledge gap, it was pertinent for us to, it was why we took the immediate opportunity to partner with the WIT Center for Journalism under the African China Reporting Project, which Bongiwe will speak to better, where we integrated some journalists into our Digital Rights Academy, bombarded them with information on digital rights and inclusion, and sent them off, so to say, to report on these issues. So this panel hopes to get them to speak to what it was that they reported on, what their challenges were, and their experiences in such a short amount of time. So now that you have a brief on what this is going, or on what's going to happen, we're going to get into it. So we'll start with Bongiwe, who would speak to the impact of the project, the collaboration and the partnerships, and then we would get into the journalists and what it was that they reported on and what they encountered during this time. Is there a microphone there? Yes? I would. So she has a presentation. Does anyone have that? Yes?
Okay, thank you so much, Khadija, for that warm introduction. And thank you everyone for having us. Molweni, Dumelan, Sanibonani, Nda, and those are some of the few greetings from our official languages in South Africa. So I am Bongiwe Tutu, and I'm the acting project coordinator of the Africa-China Reporting Project. And I will be speaking on the impact of the project in its engagement within digital identity systems, data and technology in Africa. And also, this is all captured in the books that we're going to be distributing after this session so that you can learn more about the project's work and the work that has been produced by the journalists which we supported. Oh, sorry, where should I be pointing this? Oh, there. So the Africa-China Reporting Project is based at the Wits Center for Journalism, and that's at the University of the Witwatersrand, which is commonly known as Wits University. The project has been operational since 2009 with the aim to improve the quality of reporting on African and Africa-China issues by providing facilitation and capacity building for journalists. And this is in the form of reporting grants, skills training workshops, reporting resources, networking, and other opportunities. So over the years, the project has grown organically and has placed more importance on African perspectives while expanding the scope of its partnerships and collaborations. And those are just some of the collaborations and partnerships that the project has engaged in within the workshops and training for journalists and cross-border investigations and media impacts.
And then these are images from some of the workshops that we have hosted within African countries, including South Africa, Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kenya. Okay, so it was with the generous support of Media Network in 2019 and partnership with Paradigm Initiative, which began in 2021 as introduced by Khadija, that the project was able to advance its network of journalists and facilitators with targeted training and reportage on digital identity systems in Africa, and the concepts of good ID and issues around data privacy, surveillance, and technology in Africa. And so to this particular focus, the project awarded reporting grants to 19 journalists in total, spread across the continent and in China, while upskilling them via their participation training workshops. And so you'll see the trained journalists on the image on my right, and the book that we're going to be distributing at the end of this session on my left. So the book captures all of the stories which are informing of Africa's developments within digital identity, data, and technology from local and ground level perspectives. So at the core of the project's objectives is to amplify Africa's voices in its development as it continues to engage with other global players. And as the continent ventures into the technological revolution that has changed the ways that we live, the ways that we work and associate, African governments and businesses implement new systems of digitization. So while these technologies at the end of these goods and services are beneficial, they also bear implications for economies and communities at large. And very few people have knowledge on how their personal information is used by governments and businesses and individuals, on what rights and responsibilities they have, and what risks they become exposed to, and what safeguards are or could be in place. And within the ambitions of the African Union on the Africa we want, in its Agenda 2063, which is Africa's blueprint and master plan for transforming Africa into the global powerhouse of the future. Inherent within all of the AU goals is the technological data and AI-driven systems, which will or need to be implemented in order to achieve all the set goals. And as we align Agenda 2063 goals with the UN's SDGs, we are spearheaded to develop at an accelerated pace, which could influence changes of cutting corners or violating some human rights. And as at 2019, an estimated 500 million African citizens were still without formal online identifications. And according to the World Bank, approximately 1 billion people worldwide lack official proof of identities. So this has given rise to new and distinctive digital identification projects that are being implemented across some African countries, many with an economic development agenda and others with national security goals. The private sector has also played a key role in the development of these systems. And although African governments have enacted laws to collect personal data, very few ensure that the data is recorded, stored, and used in the manner which protects and promotes the privacy of users. And as at 2017, only 17 of the 54 African countries have enacted comprehensive personal data protection legislation. So this translates to the work that still needs to be done and which is to inform of these policy concerns for the Africa that we want. So the project is very proud to have supported journalists to uncover these socioeconomic concerns and report on what the public is not aware of when it comes to data and issues around technology and privacy in Africa. So community by community, the journalists have investigated how the lives of ordinary people are affected within the adoption of digital identity systems and technologies. And these publications have been very impactful in forming society and influencing policymaking. The report by Nigerian journalist Kunle Sani, which was published in the Premium Times, is an example of this. Following the reporter's findings on how digital loan providers breach data privacy and violate the rights of Nigerian citizens, a subsequent report indicated that a crackdown by Nigeria's federal government consumer protection agency on digital loan firms that were abusing the rights of citizens in the country. So furthermore, as a result of this report, the Nigerian government was able to track down a specific loan company which maintained a reputation of infringing on human and digital rights. Then an investigation on Cameroon's civil status registry, which was published by journalist Aminata Ngengu, was also produced, and this investigation centers on the acceleration of the digitization of civil status registry in Cameroon. And the report brought awareness to communities on the importance of the civil status registration and highlighted positive impacts of the government's achievements from its initiation. This is not to say that there weren't any obstacles that were experienced within Cameroon's digitization, and that is highlighted in the investigation by Cameroon journalist Solomon Tembang, who published in the Guardian Post Daily. And the report assessed the struggles and efforts of obtaining Cameroon's digital national identity cards and the measures that were taken by the General Delegation for National Security, which is intended to tackle the problems that are plaguing the delivery of these important documents. And one of the measures was to increase the daily production capacity of the IDs from 10,000 to 15,000 per day. And in July 2021, the Cameroon government launched its new national passport production center in Yaoundé, which currently produces biometric passports within 48 hours after registration of the applicant. And so the power of the fourth estate and its capacity to of advocacy in society and implicit ability to frame socio-political issues is recognized from these series of investigations. And in a report which was published in 9 Metrics by journalist Michelle Agor, who's part of the panel, looked at the impact of double registrations in Nigeria's elections as an issue of the Independent National Electoral Commission. And she will be speaking more about that during this session. Furthermore, Tunde Omolehin investigated data for fraud, how biometrics exposed Nigerians to cyber thieves, and enhancing the voice of minorities. We have Ifedaya Ogunyeni, who investigated the persons living with disabilities who have tried to no avail to enroll for the compulsory national identity numbers, which must be linked to their phone numbers. Furthermore, advocating for minority groups was a report done by Diana Chiangwa from South Africa, who investigated the troubled quest for identity of asylum seekers in South Africa. And Anibe Idajili assessed the implications of biometric technologies for Nigerian startups. And then Temito Obayendo published in Farmer News a survey which assesses how health workers in Nigeria are violating the rights of patients with impunity. Further advocacy reporting was done by Eric Ojo, who published on the importance of bridging the digital gender-based digital gap, and particularly in northern Nigeria. And lastly, we have a report done by Hannah Ajagaye in the International Center for Investigative Reporting, where first-hand experiences of journalists being surveilled, threatened, detained, and tortured is exposed. So this is just to mention a few of all the reports that were produced by the journalists supported by the project. And you'll be able to see and read up on all these in the books that we will be distributing after the session. And it's unquestionable the impact by all the journalists, and we commend their commitment to constructive storytelling and informing the public and influencing policy making and good governance from the ground up. So this is the full contents of the book, which comprises of 5 sections, assessing the digital identity systems, biometric technologies, civil rights, gender and democracy, data rights, privacy, and technology in Africa. And the book also includes 2 workshop reports, which have numerous resources and tools for journalists and academics and other professionals. So not to take too much time, I'd just like to thank everyone who was involved in the production of this volume and everyone who assisted in the hosting of the 2 workshops, firstly held in 2019 in Johannesburg and last year in Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you, Khadija, for your support, and to the Greater Paradigm Initiative team. And that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, so let's not. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to speak to the journalists themselves. I'm very sure that you have at least heard one topic that you're interested in reading and you're like, what? People are reporting on that. So let me start with Michelle, who wrote on the use and ownership of double or multiple permanent voters card and its threats to democracy. I know here we had launched into speaking about elections a bit. So everyone is going to have just 5 minutes. So tell us a bit about your experience writing this. So it's what you wrote, your experience writing it, and challenges, all within 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to recognize Bongiwe Tutu, the Acting Programs Director of African China Reporting, who, with her financial support, is able to assist myself and many more journalists to write stories on digital rights, and of course, to the entire Paradigm Initiative team for their coaching, their tutor and teachers and the entire learning experience last year in Abuja. But I'll go straight to the point because I have just 5 minutes. I wrote on the use and ownership of double or multiple permanent voters card and its threat to democracy, basically talking about the abuse of digital rights by Nigerian electorates. So first of all, I'd like to also say that I'm a broadcaster, I'm a broadcast journalist, and I work in a talk station, and very, very important and very much of the core of my job is around news, current affairs, and politics in Nigeria. I'm very passionate about Nigerian politics. I'm very passionate about Nigerian news, Nigeria's impact in Africa, and also international news. So knowing back in 2021 that the 2023 elections is fast approaching, I decided to write an investigative piece on the PVC. We do understand that I think sometime last year, INEC introduced the CVR, which is called the Continuous Voters Register. And it was a new initiative and the best thing from, or the newest best thing from INEC, trying to get people registered online first, so the physical INEC offices are not overly crowded. However, I did realize that sometimes during my radio show, people will call me from different parts of Lagos telling me that, oh, they don't believe in voting, they don't believe in this PVC thing, they don't believe in INEC, they're not going to vote. And voters' apathy is one thing that has kept us under regressive and oppressive governments. So, and people will call in to say that, oh, I've seen someone with more than one PVC. How can one person have 3 PVCs? And you want me to believe INEC is serious? So these accusations became it was just too much. And every time they would call with that accusation, I never have anything to say because I'm not INEC, but I decided to do some digging as to whether or not it's possible for someone to have 2 PVCs or more than 1 PVC. And alas, it is true. You can have more than 1 PVC. But the most important question is, can you vote even with more than 1 PVC? Can you vote multiple times or vote more than once? The answer is a capital no. So whether you have 10 PVCs, 200,000 PVCs, you cannot have more than 1 vote. And I'll tell you why. That's because, well, number one, INEC through the Nigerian House of National Representative or Senate, you can only vote in 1 polling unit. If you travel from 1 state or 1 polling unit to another, you cannot vote in more than 1 polling unit. That means that you cannot vote more than once in an electioneering year. That's number one. Because if you go to these polling units, if your name is not on that notice board, you're not voting, number one. Number two, you most likely get arrested as well, or beaten or something. That's one. Number 2 reason why you cannot have more than 1 vote is when you vote, there's usually an ink that they put on your thumb or maybe your index finger, and there's no voting after that. So that's number 2. Number 3, we have the INEC right now. They do have the fingerprints identification. So even if you have 10 PVCs or you have a twin sister or twin brother or whatever, no 2 people can have 1 thumbprint or 1 fingerprint. So you cannot vote. And recently with this new CVR, they have a bimodal system, meaning if you go to any polling unit to cast your vote, besides your thumbprints or your fingerprints recognition, they also have a facial recognition. So your face is also in the INEC server. And should you go to more than 1 polling unit to vote, you'll be immediately arrested. So I did a whole lot of digging, and I was able to bring all this truth. And finally, as a journalist, I can now go about to talk about it or have at least some responses when people ask questions about the credibility of voting. I hope somewhere with this investigation and reports that somewhere someone here is sitting down who has these questions or doubts can understand that it is impossible to vote more than once in Nigeria.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So
thank you.
I was about to stop you. And I'm very sure that a lot of people have a lot of things to say about that, but we're not going to get into it now.
You can ask me the questions when you see me. I have
right. Hello, we still have to speak to other people. Write your questions down.
Please write them. Thank you.
Write your questions down. So we're going to move to the next journalist so that he can tell us what it was that he discovered as well. Who is Ifedayo Ogunyemi? who wrote on persons with disability suffering compulsory NIN enrollment. Yeah. So 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ifedayo Ogunyemi. I've been working with people with disabilities for a couple of months, or let me say years, and I think that was actually what informed the reason why I wanted to delve into the challenges of people with disabilities while registering for the national identity number. But the issue is that when I had discussions even prior to going to the field, the issues pertain to how they were able to get access to some of these buildings, particularly because we have a national act in Nigeria that actually caters for the specialty, the need to actually cater for the needs of people with disabilities when registered for this compulsory NIN. So when I got to the field, I found out that, okay, before that, as of today, NIMC actually the federal government actually got a grant from the World Bank to increase the number of people with NIN records. I think by 2024 or 2024, there should be about 140 million Nigerians on the NIMC record database. But the issue is that it gave a lot of targets as to number of women that should be there, as to number of children that should be in that particular target. But then I found out that the target for people with disabilities is not included in the data set that was made available. So I went out to investigate, and by December 2021, Nigeria has registered 71 million people on the NIMC database. As of now, we don't have a definite number of people with disabilities on that have been captured by that particular database. So some of the things that I found out is that what are the challenges of people with disabilities when I go to the field? There's this 52-year-old woman in Ogun State, Bolaji, who has leprosy. As of today, she enrolled for NIN, and then for over 8 months, and even up to now, she hasn't gotten an NIN, the 11 unique numbers. What are the issues? The issues were created, the challenges was created because of the fact that the names were probably misspelled and they can't get all of those things. Then during the course of my investigation, I went to a lot of enrollment centers and found out that some of these buildings, facilities that are actually where these registrations take place, they are not disability friendly. People with disabilities cannot access them. And I appreciate previous speakers who spoke in the previous sessions. They actually hammered on these particular things. These are some of the things I actually found out on the field. And I brought all of them together to report about them to actually help create an advocacy for them. And because there are lots of disabilities and there are lots of needs that actually should focus on them. But then people with disabilities today have been cut off, but particularly like Balaji now, she can't make phone calls. You can call her, but she can't make phone calls because the number has been bad. She can't, another person who lives in leprosy in Ogun State too, I think Sunday Lighton, can't even get money. You can't send money to him. He has to use another person's account to do that. So a lot of these atrocities, or let me just say atrocities, yeah, if you allow me, are some of the things that we are subjecting people with disabilities to because of the fact that certain public buildings are not accessible to them. People.
Okay, if I'd have to stop you there. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So I'm trying to keep to time in a way that allows for the audience to contribute as well. So you'd have to forgive me. So we'll quickly speak to Temitope Obayendo, who wrote on how Nigerian health workers violate patients' rights with impunity. That's interesting. That's an interesting heading. So tell us about that.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Temitope Obayendo. I work with Pharma News, health publication. We've been into health publication for over 40 years. That is Pharma News. We publish, if you're in the health sector, you know us. So we've been dealing with patients, we deal with healthcare events and all that. So when the opening for the African China reporting came up, I saw that gap that I need to look into how patients' rights have been protected digitally and offline. So I went into it. I started with excitement, setting out to administer about 500 questionnaires to patients because it's an hospital-based interview. So I was to interview, or I interviewed, I sampled 10 hospitals in Delta State and in Lagos together, 7 in Lagos, then 10 in Delta, 3 in Delta State. So I started with lawsuits, hoping to administer questionnaires to 500 patients, but I was turned back because by the time I set out to do it, to see how patients' rights have been really upheld, I saw that the opposition of public hospital officials to interrogation, to investigation was alarming. So I had to just recall and, I need to go back to the drawing board. Thanks to Bongiwe here, as I was going on, I was giving her the feedback. She had to encourage me that if I can't do that, then maybe I should reschedule my sample size to 250 so that I can administer the question. So I started, and it was so shocking because hospital management officials, they will tell you, you can't administer questionnaire to our patients. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I was now really interested. I said, okay, so if you guys are preventing us from administering questionnaires to patients, that means there are things hidden here. So that's
check your. That means as a professional, I need you to move. You are the only camera that I have. So move to the stage. As a professional, you are the only camera that I have. Gently move to the stage. Camera one, what's up with your transmitter? Camera one, check your transmitter. Thank you. Yeah, that means once you're ready, drop your tripod and drop camera one, come in, look for the
that first of all, we have to that's the question. First of all, we have to and check the list of those who if I actually vote there, and they give a thumbnail, how is it that for an election, a one-day thing, especially that of the presidential election, how is it that you can move and vote with your thumbprints and with a record that has shown that you have voted for that thing? How is it possible? Give me a practical, tell me how someone can go to work.
Camera one and camera two.
It's your word. I told you how it can not happen.
No, camera one. I'm on the shot now.
How is it possible? How?
Change. Yeah, I'm on camera one.
That's all.
That's the thing. I give them to shake it. It's fine. I'm not too increase the ISO. Please increase the ISO. Thank you, camera one. Camera two. I knew this would be good. Camera one, go wide, go wide, go wide, go wide. Camera one, go wide. Wide. Yes, wide, 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 wide. I mean, so much. Say that is. Oh my God. Oh. Drop your eyes to. Camera two on you. Left side coming. Can we end this screen now? Camera two on you. Left side coming. Can we end the screen now?